Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppas with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. And I have got the most beautiful guest with me today. And again, this lady is someone I have met on LinkedIn. And we have talked and had conversations and had lovely exchanges, and we have never actually seen each other in real person. And we are now on Zoom together. I can see her. And it's like we've met for the first time, but it's like we've known each other forever. So welcome, Amber Smith, to my Human Conversation.
Thank you, Jules. It feels somewhat surreal actually tonight, doesn't it? Because obviously we said that we do this, but obviously seeing you kind of there, sitting there in the flesh, it feels like I'm sitting in front of you. It does, as I say, feel somewhat surreal, but it's lovely to be talking to you. So thank you for having me on.
And it's lovely to have you as my guest. So just so the listeners know a little bit more about you, you are a copywriter, a content writer, and an editor.
Yes, I am.
I want to talk all about that. So I always think about, I've said to many of my guests, I don't really plan these podcasts because the idea of it being the human conversation means that we just chat. But I also try and get it into some sort of order for the listener, so that they get an idea of like who you are, where you came from, and and what you do. So let's start at the beginning.
It always seems like a good place to start. We have to start somewhere.
So Amber, where have you come from in terms of your career? Where did you start?
Do you know, it will seem like almost opposite ends of the spectrum, but I guess my career really started when I decided that I went to college after secondary school, decided I'd had enough there, and I went out into the world of work. I was very independent, thought I knew everything, wanted to get out there, and I started off for a company back then who were called Securicor, worked my way up, and then went out into the world of sales. So predominantly a lot of the stuff that I have done has been sales based. And then I guess really sort of family life came into it, had 2 children, wanted to find something that still utilised my sales skills and communication skills, but something that also could strike a balance in life, that could kind of bring kind of family life into it and make it work, but also meant that I could have something that I could kind of like grow as well, which is when I decided actually copywriting would be perfect. I love language, I love communicating, I love people, so it all seemed kind of like marrying together. So I thought, you know what, step into it and give it a go, which is where I am really.
That's really interesting that you started in sales. I always find that interesting, obviously, being a sales, passionate about sales as I am. So Securicor as a company, I do remember. I don't know, are they still going? I don't know if they're still going.
I think when I left the company, they were merging with DHL then. So I don't know that they are still in existence. Someone out there may well correct me, but I think they were kind of merging. So I think they kind of went under something else. And sales was one of those things I fell into. It wasn't something that I thought, I'm going to do. I'd always had little kind of jobs that were very customer facing kind of before that. But actually I quite liked it because it was all about really sitting down and chatting to people like kind of we are now. So, I mean, bad about that, it was quite good fun.
So do you feel like they trained you well in that kind of role? Did you get lots of corporate sales training?
No, actually none. I remember being kind of thrown a competitor's manual actually at the time, and someone started saying to me, you might want to have a read of that. So I delved in and out of that at different points, but there was no official training. It was kind of, I distinctly remember being told it was kind of, will literally give yourself, you know, enough rope to kind of hang yourself with. It was sink or swim. So it was kind of off you go. So, you know, you were given your areas, and mine was quite big at the time. It was Surrey and Hampshire I covered when I first went out, you know, and it was off you go, like, make it work. And that was it. You had kind of quarterly presentations, and there were odd bits of training here and there, but nothing really that kind of set me off. And I guess I just decided that the only way I could do it was to kind of be myself. And so actually it was lovely when we connected on LinkedIn, because I was like, yes, this is exactly what it is and what it was always about for me, you know, and it should always be about people, isn't it, you know?
Definitely. And I think what's really lovely about what you're saying at the moment, from my point of view, is that here's the lady who wasn't trained in sales, went out and was successful in sales just by actually being human and being herself, which is actually what it's all about, as you rightly say. So that's a really nice thing to hear. I'm actually really chuffed about that. But here's the thing, like, so you're a saleswoman, you're out there, you're doing your stuff. It's a fairly, I'm presuming that's quite a competitive world, because they were a well-known brand. I suspect there was some pressure on targets and stuff, were there, with that job?
It was always quite competitive. But I guess because I guess, you know, it was almost like running your own little mini business, I guess, all the time. You know, you had your figures, you know, you had to make everything balanced. Yes, you had your targets. Yes, you had your competitors. But I guess for me, I kind of, you know, just saw as that, you know, I was doing what I was doing. I was doing as well as I could be doing. You know, I knew I always had my eye on what others were doing outside of the company, as in competitors, and kind of pitch myself where, you know, I thought was right in order to kind of like drive it forward. So yeah, I guess at the time I felt like I took it in my stride. So you know, it's funny, isn't it? You know, maybe because I was thrown into something, you know, you just kind of get on and kind of pull your socks up and off you go. The thing is with sales, I suppose you're only really ever as good as your last, you know, sale, aren't you? You know, and that's it. You just have to keep pushing forward.
And it's interesting that as well, that comment, because that's so the culture that I was brought up in for 30 plus years was, yeah, you might have won your awards and you probably hit all your targets, which I did consistently hit my targets. But actually, as you rightly say, you're only really as good as the last sale that you did. You know, so the minute you have a bad period or a bad quarter, or, you know, whatever it might be, that's what you're remembered for, as opposed to all of the great stuff you've done before. So.
Oh, absolutely. It's so true. It's so true. It could be a very different phone call, you know, with your boss from kind of, you know, 1 week, you know, say, like you say, maybe to the next quarter, you know, and not necessarily, you know, for the better. So, you know, but I guess, you know, it does mean you have to build up a thick skin, doesn't it? You know, I think, you know, and you have to have a degree of, you know, resilience, which I think, you know, as you will find, you know, is really going to help you in any aspect of your life and business, you know, whatever you sort of step into.
This for me is kind of the crux of it. Because in life it's the same, you know, you'll get knocked back by certain things, by relationships, by loss, by illness, you know, all of those things, redundancy. And those things are the things that help you to build that resilience, you know, and that's a big subject in its own right. So we'll come back to talking about, I want to talk about the transition from working in sales. So did you work in sales and then stop and have family and then come back to work? So you had a gap in between. Was that how it went?
Yeah, so I did have a bit of a gap. Yeah, so I sort of, you know, from Securicor, I worked for, you know, a few other sort of sales sort of companies. And actually, when I left to have the children, I was working within the for quite a big sort of hotel group in sort of sales. So unfortunately it wasn't a sort of role that I could step back into after having children because of the sort of demands on sort of time, etc. So actually it was trying to find something that worked. So I didn't dive straight into copywriting straight away. I did go back in and I've worked for an estate agent sort of since, and it was from then that I thought, actually, how can I find something that I can do for myself that means that I can still be that person, you know, juggling sort of family life, but also that person that can have something for myself, and actually I can grow it, you know, as they grow, really, kind of, I guess, in parallel. So it sort of went from there, and I just sort of decided that I'd kind of, look at sort of training, to kind of hone in those skills, because whilst within sort of sales there is lots of communication, whether it be verbal and written, and you need to be able to communicate well with people, but it was the sort of specifics I wanted as well. So I've done that, but I think, again, you sort of say on social media all the time, we are a kind of work in progress. We're forever sort of learning and kind of building and growing our skills. So I think all the time, whether it be, I think every year I think, oh, maybe I'll do a little course here, to kind of build upon things, or I'm reading people's articles, and I mean, I love a book, so a bit like yours, since we're talking about books and learning and things, so I happily pick up one of those and sit down and read.
You learn so much from reading. My mum was a huge reader. She would always have a book on the go, always. And she always did crosswords, those were the days when you didn't necessarily have all the computers and the online stuff. So she would always learn from all of those things. And she just had this amazing library of knowledge in her head. If there was a quiz show on, my mum knew the answers to every single question. And I always used to say, Mum, just go on them and win all the money. Oh, I don't want to go on the telly, she'd say. Not like her daughter.
Whereas now we're just, I'll just quickly Google that.
Google's king.
Not necessarily the need all the time, is there, to have it in your mind? But I just think that's amazing when people do have that ability to kind of like keep all that in there, and then to be able to kind of, like you say, like she could watch a kind of quiz show and answer all those questions. That's fantastic.
With the kind of whole copywriting thing, I'm just really interested in what was that very first piece of work you did to start that copywriting business?
I did a really, really good course, and actually the course was quite good, that sort of said, look, when you're going to set yourself up, you need to think about how you're going to market yourself. So, so it was a case of getting myself on LinkedIn. It was setting up, I had started a WordPress blog, which is where I thought, even before I had clients, I thought I need to have something to showcase myself, who I am and what I'm doing. So that was how I started to promote myself. And the first, I guess, a lot of the work initially was kind of like blog and article writing, which is kind of where I sort of specialise, really. It's something that I sort of quite like to do. But it was, just pushing myself out there, as it still is for all of us, so starting, it was so many different little things, little building blocks, which did seem quite daunting at the time, but I always sort of say to myself in my head, like, just one block, one brick at a time, you just build all the time, don't you? And then you just slowly edge forward, and then I think things start to flow a bit more, and you start to feel a bit more comfortable and confident in your own skin and what you're doing. Because I think when you first throw yourself out there, it's really hard. You're based out there, you feel quite vulnerable. I think especially with social media, you see lots of fantastic people out there and experts within, their own sort of field, and, even people doing very similar things. And I think it can be sort of quite hard, but I think it is just taking that leap of faith and putting things out there on LinkedIn and WordPress, etc.
Yeah, it sure is. So do you work in a particular sector? Is there a particular type of client you like to work with?
I've worked across the board really. I mean, I do I work with sort of digital and media agencies, but I also have worked with kind of like leadership and coaching specialists. I have worked with like individuals that sort of want to maybe promote themselves on social media platforms, and not tied to any particular niche. And I kind of always position myself that, even if I don't know a sector, I don't have to know it, but, there is a plethora of stuff out there on the internet, and I always would fully research everything. So I don't specialise. Obviously, I have my background in kind of the sort of sales and corporate world. So I think that has kind of held me in good stead, and is a good basis of knowledge and understanding of business and people. And a lot of that, I think you can apply to different things. And I think a lot of what I also do is it's not just in the copy, it's in you sort of supporting that business and that individual, and they kind of want you to be able to help them with their sort of marketing and kind of the whole picture rather than just one element to it, I guess.
Yeah, I like that actually. I think that's quite an important thing for you to say, isn't it, when people are listening in? Just that I think anybody who works in a kind of a freelance capacity, I guess we could call ourselves that really. I think any of us want to be part of the team, don't we? And I think because we are sort of on our own working in our businesses, we can do that. We can be that person. And it's quite a comfortable situation for a lot of businesses to use you as that extension, I think, as well. Certainly low risk for them as well to have something.
I think so. You're right, it is low risk, because, they may not have the budget to take on someone, to work for them full time or part time or whatever their needs may well be. So it kind of pays for them to bring someone in, either on a retainer or kind of on a kind of pay by pay sort of basic project by project basis. I think that does quite often work for people.
The other thing I think that's interesting is that you're almost that external eye on their business. So you're not in it so close. So the other massive benefit is you've got that outside in view, that layperson view.
It's like a fresh set of eyes, I think, as well.
I think that's really useful.
When you're in the thick of it, sometimes you can't, you can't see it. So I think sometimes it is nice having that person externally, sort of maybe giving their perspective, on something, or how, their recommendations. And it may well be things that company hasn't thought of, and it can just help them down a path. And if they're having a bit of a headache and it's all getting a bit much, I think sometimes it is easy to think, well, I can confidently and comfortably give that to that person, knowing that they're going to do a good job, they're going to, get it done on time. And, it allows them to kind of focus on where they need to be, in their business as well.
Time is one of those things you never get back. Do you remember we've talked about this, haven't we, on LinkedIn so many times? Oh my goodness. Okay, so my next question is around the whole copywriting, content writing. So what's the difference then, Amber?
Well, yes, this, and I was saying to you, I don't want to get into talking about the difference. And you're like, oh no, let's talk about the difference. I mean, I know, please don't anybody shout at me. To me, I think, I guess that once upon a time, I think they were very definitive, this is a copywriter, very much kind of advertisement type kind of like positioning, and then there were the content, like writers, within the kind of like marketing sort of like field. And but I think now, I think very much, the writing and the copy itself is between the two is very persuasive. You are going to have blog and article writers, working, between the two, and I think they do kind of fuse together. I personally don't know that I see very clear and definitive guidelines between the two, but I'm sure there are others perhaps that feel that they would. And I know there's some people that would definitely define themselves as, I am just a copywriter and I am a content writer. I'd say I would do both, I'd say they do fuse quite nicely together.
But I think it's good. We all need to have our own opinion. So that's the first thing. So I think it's great that you can say that and say it with confidence, and that's your belief, and that's fine. And one of the things that I talked about in my last podcast, which was with a great guy called Gary Gumbleton. So he does video content, really interesting guy. He's had quite rapid growth in his business. But one of the things we talked about is actually now I think marketing and sales are the closest they have probably ever been. I really, really, really believe that, because sales, people are really starting to understand that sales is about relationships and connection and storytelling and, and all those lovely things that marketing is also about, So for me, the more I talk to the marketing people out there, the more I think we're all doing the same stuff, really.
It's very, very, very similar, isn't it? But it's funny because you're right. Very much these days, they're very close together and they need to work together because they go hand in hand, don't they? One doesn't work without the other. But I remember, back when I started out in sales, I mean, the sales department didn't really talk to the marketing department.
No.
But you couldn't believe that now, could you? You know, I never had any dealings with the marketing department ever. You know,
No,
it's crazy. I mean,
so,
I guess that's probably somebody else doing that, but
yeah, but it's true. And they, you know, traditionally in my career, sales and marketing have never really come together as one force, which has always baffled me, because we've all got the same message, we've all got the same ethos, we're all trying to attract the same ideal client, and yet we would never talk to each other about what we should be putting out in marketing, and then actually how marketing would like us to continue the sales journey with the client. Because the fact is that the journey for the client is right from the beginning to the end. And that's marketing into sales, you know. It's really interesting. And I think with today's social media and all of the outlets we have to connect with people that we never had before, then actually now we're starting to realise what human connection is actually all about. And so now you're seeing it in marketing and you're seeing it in sales, thank goodness. And it's all coming together.
That, you know, I love that. And I love the fact that what you were saying about with social media, that, you know, how people are wanting to connect on, you know, more of an in-depth level rather than just kind of like the surface and like pitching at people. You know, it's more about getting to know that person and building those relationships. And, you know, potentially down the road there may be opportunities, or it may just be that, you know, you're able to help each other or collaborate in some way, shape or form. You know, I think social media is a fantastic tool, you know, and you know, you can be working with someone, you know, globally, you know, and I guess that's also the beauty of freelance, isn't it? You don't have to necessarily just be placed in one location, you know. You go where your laptop, you know, can go, you know. It's fantastic.
Exactly. So are you working globally with some of your work?
Yeah, I'd sort of do bits and pieces all over, really, like some UK based stuff. And I, you know, I've worked with a lady based in Paris. I've done stuff with a company based out in Dubai, but I also work with a digital agency based in London. So, you know, sort of varied, and it's great. And it's, you know, because I think with what we're doing, you've got Zoom, you've got Skype, you know, you've got social media, you know, obviously you've got emails, you know, and it's very, very, very easy to do that now. You don't necessarily have to be sitting in the same office, you know. I guess the one, you know, slight downside with freelancing is the fact that sometimes it can be that slightly lonelier place, I guess. So I guess it's kind of working around that, and, you know, depending on how you are as a person, you know, filling those needs as well when you sort of can.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. I think there's a lot of people suffer with that and struggle with that, because as much as we actually, the work we do is about connection and, you know, the human connection, we also lack that with the fact that we work on our own. But what I love about things like Zoom is I can do things like my virtual cuppas. And
I love that. I have got a drink here.
Yes, I haven't got my cuppa tonight. I need to get that.
Oh no!
I think the thing about that is it's quite interesting. People probably think all I do all day is have virtual cuppas with people. The point is, it's a very lovely way of getting that connection that you need, because actually you are on your own. But equally, networking. You mentioned earlier that, you know, it's not always about the people that you will sort of connect with on LinkedIn. They won't always be your customers, but they will tell other people about you. And that's the networking beauty of it all, isn't it?
I just think there's a wealth of possibilities out there, isn't there? You know, and I think I do, you know, out of the platforms, I'm quite heavily based on LinkedIn. And I think that's kind of where I've started. That's where it's grown. And I do use other ones. But I found that as in particular has worked sort of quite well. And I guess maybe dependent on your field, or dependent on where you're able to focus your attentions, because I do think it's better to maybe pick one or two and do them well, rather than to pick, you know, several and to be able to kind of, you know, struggle with that. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
Sort of doing them, you know, because that's obviously, you know, your marketing, your shop front, but then you've got the rest of it as well. It's trying to sort of fit it all in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think as well, it's where's the bigger wins, where's the best connections, you know, because I honestly think that I've tried quite hard with Instagram. I'm just not in love with it. I'm sure somebody would come along and say to me, oh, but George, you could do so much on there. But actually, I'm just not engaging with it. And I always trust that. I trust that about me. If I'm engaging with it, it's because somehow I am truly connecting with it. So, you know.
No, I think you're right. I think they're almost like you say, if it's not kind of working for you and your business, then I do think there comes a time where you have to sort of make a call on it and think, well, perhaps if that isn't working for me and say other platforms are working better, it's better to kind of really, like you say, focus in on that, and to do that well, I think,
I think so.
And build and grow.
So tell me, what's next for Amber L. Smith?
I noticed how you put the L in there. Squished it in there. I've always planned that, what I'm doing with the sort of, the copywriting, sort of side of things to kind of, build and grow on that. I think this year it does really seem to be about, like stories. It seems to be about, people wanting to connect and engage with one another, which I think is brilliant and fantastic. And I think it does open up, so many different opportunities for people, linking up with one another. And I guess for the future, we'll see. I think, I would like to sort of grow to be able to kind of expand out, so whether that means any sort of collaborations or anything sort of talking wise and things like that would be fantastic. So doing this podcast is brilliant. It's the first one I've done, so I'm like, oh, give myself a pat on the back.
Yeah, you've been amazing. I love it.
It's so nice to talk to you. I've loved it.
Oh, well, I've loved
it. I feel like it's just you and me, so I don't know how going to go out.
Yeah, nobody's listening. It's just
no one else is going to hear us. So it's nice to have a cup of tea and chat.
Yeah, and that's actually how I want this podcast to be. And there are some episodes that become quite, not serious, that's the wrong word, but they become quite intense because we're talking about specific things. I think when I talked to Clarice the other day, we did about Google.
That
was really interesting in terms of like, I learned like loads of stuff about Google that I didn't know.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. Yeah.
It was like a mini training course in a podcast.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And then with other guests, I get just as much from just getting to know them and find out, well, where did they come from and what was their background. And so I love the podcast because I never know quite what I'm going to get on each one, which is great. Yeah.
And I guess that's, to a degree, that's a normal human conversation, isn't it? You don't, when you meet up, with, whether it be a friend or a colleague or anybody, you don't plan out your conversation, I mean, you might have an idea of, if you have something specific to talk about, but generally you're kind of just going with the flow and you're building that connection and that rapport with someone, aren't you?
Yeah, totally. And that's of course what I talk about in the book a lot, isn't it? About this kind of life skills and sales skills stuff, because it's so true. It's just true.
It's so true. And so much corresponds with the other, doesn't it? They do marry in with one another. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I half expected you might tell me you're going to write a book.
Oh, do you know what? I have always said I'd love to write a book. I've joked about it with my family, and it would be something actually down the line that would be fantastic to do. So I've said it now. So at some point that means I have to hold myself accountable.
Yeah. And
I will be accountable.
I will definitely hold you accountable. But what's your book going to be about?
Oh, that's a very good question. Whether or not I would make it to do with my field or actually something creative, because I really like the sort of story sort of side of things, and how that can kind of like develop and how you get lured in, and so there's a couple of different possibilities, and I'm really only kind of just scratch the surface of it, and I think I'd really need to go into so much more depth to kind of work out exactly what I'd want to say and what I'd want it to be. But I don't know, maybe both, who knows, in an ideal world.
I love it. I can't wait for your book. I'm going to be on now all the time. Amber, have you written your book? Amber, have you planned your book? What's the title? What are you going to write about?
I know. Well, I've got a pad out here. I'll have to start making some scribbles of something. I will have to start planning it. Yeah, I must. Yeah.
It's almost that, you know, once you start something, it kind of much more likely to happen, isn't it? That's kind of the whole premise.
I think once, you know, because sometimes it's very hard to get past that point of the idea and something in your head and to do it, whatever it is. You know, like a friend of mine would say, do you know what, I really hate stopping a book and starting another book. I just can't do it. So quite often there's a long period of time before she'll start another one. And I guess that's the same with maybe starting something, whether it be like a business or writing your own book. But I guess once you take that jump, you dip your toes in, you're in it then, aren't you? You know,
there's no going back. Although, you know, on my book journey, I took a year to write my book, and I started in August in 2017, and then I got to Christmas that year, and I said to I had like a writing coach, which was great because she kept me accountable, and then she would just read what I'd written and just give it her sort of outside opinion on certain things, like, oh, can you add to this? Can you make this more? Can I ask you about this? Which was really good. And I got to Christmas and I said to her, I haven't written anything. And she said, okay, that's okay. It's not a problem. I said, well, it is really, because I don't think this book's any good. I said, no one's going to read it. I said, it's just, everybody knows this stuff. It's rubbish.
You always say that when you're the person that knows it, don't you?
That's so true, because you're in it and you know it so well. You think everybody else knows absolutely everything you know. And then she just said to me, okay, well, look, I want you to just take a month. I don't want you to do anything. And then we'll have another call in a month's time. And by the time we had the next call after Christmas had gone and we kind of got back to normality, I said to her, I'm ready to write again now.
What did you do in that month?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I mean, we had Christmas. And I think also it's quite close to me losing Dad. So there's quite a lot of emotions still flying around. And I literally parked it. I almost thought, if I'm honest, I probably wouldn't go back to it.
Might not pick this up again.
And I'm so glad I did.
Because I loved the book. I loved the ease of the read. I could hear your voice, you know, throughout the book, which I think, you know, I harp on about tone of voice and language all the time. And the essence of that was, it was there, you know, I could hear you like talking and leading through, and it was a lovely read, you know, with such good flow, and it was fantastic, really well laid out as well, clear and crisp, and it was great.
Thank you.
You're so proud of yourself.
Thank you. No, it means a lot. It means a lot when you get good feedback. It is amazing. But it's like anything, you do it because I just wanted people to see that what sales was really about. That was really important for me. So
because people do have a lot of different thoughts about what they think sale is. You know, I know even when I went out and I watched other people and I saw what other people did, and you know, I was very definite about how I didn't want to be, you know, and how I did want to portray myself. And you know, I wanted, you want it to be professional, but you want it to be human, you know. And it's interesting, isn't it? I think even today, you know, what people will think a salesperson is, you know, if a salesperson is coming in, oh, you know, what they're going to be like, you know, and are they going to be pushy, and oh, are we going to be able to talk to them, and you know, and then you're sort of, you know, counting down the minutes, and you know, you're dreading it. But I think, you know, it's nice to have something like your book out there that actually clearly says to people, you know, this is what sales is. It's nothing to be afraid of, but say it is people, you know, and like you say, you know, it's life skills as well, isn't it? You know, sales skills are life skills, and that's true to say. You know.
Very true. Very true. I think so. So look, I have loved our chat.
I loved it. Well, I feel like I've gone on now. I thought, I was very worried, thinking, I don't know what I'm going to have to say.
I think we could probably talk all evening, to be honest. You know? I really do. So no problem on that front at all. But look, if people are listening, which I know there will be people listening, obviously, how are they going to find out where they can get hold of you?
So I think, as I said to you earlier, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Amber L. Smith. I think you put the L in there earlier.
I did, just so that people knew which one you were.
I've got a WordPress site, which is simplyamberlou.wordpress.com if you want to check out any blogs. And yeah, I mean, get in touch, if people want to have a chat or, message or what have you, they'd be welcome to get in contact.
That's great. And I would recommend linking in with you, definitely, because you post regularly. Your posts are interesting and thought-provoking, which is how we've connected, I think, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So I will make sure that all your links are actually in the description. But thank you so much for being my guest. I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting you for the first time.
It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it. I hope we get to chat again, even, separately to the podcast,
We'll have virtual cuppas. Don't worry about that now. That's going to happen.
That's good.
But listen, thank you for being my guest. I really appreciate that.
Thank you
very much indeed. If you've loved my podcast, then you need to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. You need to like, and you can even comment if you want to, and give us a review if you really love what we're doing. We are on SoundCloud, we're on iTunes, and we're on Spotify. So you can find us all over the place. And we also publish now to YouTube, so you can actually watch us having our human conversation as well. But thank you so much for joining us, listeners. Ta-da for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.